Atlanta megachurch preacher Eddie Long has reached an out-of-court settlement with 4 young men who accused him of sexual coercion. The case drew national attention because of Long's international fame as a televangelist who has crusaded against homosexuality and gay marriage. Long told members of his church he would fight the allegations, but instead it appears he's paid his accusers off to avoid further scrutiny. For more on this, I'm joined now by MSNBC contributor Goldie Taylor, contributing editor at thegrio.com. Goldie, it's important to note that these allegations were made by men who said this happened when they were young boys, but has this settlement before any kind of proceedings indicated that there may be fire where there's been smoke?
I think the settlement says a lot. When these allegations first surfaced some months ago, you saw a very strong Bishop Long stand in his pulpit and say, compare himself to David and Goliath, and he said he had 5 rocks and that he hadn't thrown one yet. Well, those rocks really turned out to be pebbles more than anything else. So I think the settlement does say something about smoke and fire, yes.
Isn't this another worrying example of how people with this kind of power in churches that they've built on their own, where there doesn't appear to be any oversight, any structural accountability, that kind of environment allows all kinds of things to happen?
Well, I'll tell you this, my family still lives in that community. I own a home in that community. I watched the rise of New Birth. I lived there when he became the pastor and then named himself bishop. And, their contribution to the community over the years is broad, vast, and deep. They did an awful lot to help build economic self-empowerment throughout the community, community food banks and those kinds of givings. And so it was quite a shock when these kinds of allegations came, but the issue is not that they were young boys, they were of age. The issue is the coercion, the manipulation, and then the use of church funds to pay them off, while he was in these relationships. And so it's really about stewardship. And he broke a very strong bond of stewardship he had with that community.
But I ask you again, is one of the problems with these kinds of empire-building churches that to some extent these men, these leaders, are a law unto themselves? There's no kind of bishop above them in reality. There's no structure above them. He founded that church, didn't he? This was an independent organization.
This is an independent organization. He didn't found it. He moved into the church as its pastor when it was smaller. And then he grew the church and changed its bylaws, named himself bishop, and then began to change the structure. And so Bishop Eddie Long answers to no denomination, no one above him, just himself, and not even his board of trustees there at the church. And so his say is the first and final say about everything at that church.
You were saying earlier that he's had quite an influence in the community, but I'm assuming, therefore, that the community is going to know all about this, and it's likely to undermine his status in the church? It
really has. There has been a significant drop in the level of attendance at the church. Donations are down. I hear by as much as 60% that they are laying off staff. Some staff has been asked to take pay cuts, and so the church is hurting financially on the back of this scandal. But I have to tell you that the community itself is hurting on the back of this scandal. New Birth Baptist really is an important component of South DeKalb County there in Georgia. It has elected political leaders. They had presidents in its pulpits. Coretta Scott King was laid to rest there. And so it has been an institution of great importance in that community. And the very sad thing about that is losing its stature and losing its ability to curry, positive influence there.
Are we right to assume that these young men have been paid off with funds from the church?
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that.
There is no doubt about that. There is no doubt.
How can it be possible to justify that?
Well, the lawsuit was against Bishop Long and the church. That church is Bishop Long. In fact, he owns it. He is its only shareholder in the church. And so, yes, the church was on the hook for any misdeeds he may have done. And so justify it, absolutely. He used the confines of that church to perpetrate these.
MSNBC contributor Goldie Taylor, thanks so much for joining us.